Go? Okay. Hello, everyone. A very, very warm welcome to you all. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Hazel Jane, and I have the pleasure of being your host this evening. I see you've done the traditional event thing of leaving the front row completely blank, and that's totally fine. I won't hold it against you. So today we have an absolutely incredible panel. We have James Varga, we have Rachel Jones, and we have Lorenzo Conti. And I will ask them to introduce themselves a little bit further in just a moment. We're talking today about data and AI-driven entrepreneurship. And there will be time for a Q&A at the end. I always say this again and again, we're so lucky to get to share the room with people in real life and ask questions and get their real opinions and their real stories. So please do have a little think about what you might want to ask, and please do put your hands up at the end. There'll be a roving microphone. Now, before we begin, we are not expecting any fire alarms. So if you do hear a big loud sound, please take that seriously, and someone will lead us out somewhere, I'm sure. I want to thank Live to Air for streaming this tonight. So big thanks to Alan over there for making that happen. And I also want to just make a quick mention to the Data Lab community. I hope that you are all part of it already, but if you're not, it's absolutely incredible. It's a chance to connect with each other. There's 101 schemes inside of it and opportunities, so please do take advantage of that, and you can do that with this beautiful looking QR code just here. I'm going to give you 5 more seconds to let that QR code sing. Okay. That will do it. So welcome again, and thank you to you all for being here and being part of this. We're talking about entrepreneurship today. People in this room will be in different stages of that. There might be people who have just an idea. There might be some people that are pursuing that idea. Maybe some of you are a bit more established. So I'd like to hear about you and your ideas. If you could just give us a little bit of a rundown about your entrepreneurship journey and where you are now, that would be fantastic. James, can I start with you? I'm going to pass you this mic.
Start with me?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, good to meet everybody. Thanks for having us. James Varga. Recently came out of my last startup, which was Direct ID. Direct ID is a global credit and risk platform. We use open banking. We used open banking to help create financially inclusive credit scores. But I've done a few startups over the years and a bit of a startup junkie when it comes to building products and solving problems. So happy to share whatever.
Thank you. Rachel?
Hello, I'm Rachel Jones. I'm not really an entrepreneur. I've sort of fallen into various things as I've gone along. But I founded a business called Snapdragon Monitoring, which fights fakes and online threats. And I do that because I invented a baby product about 20 years ago and it was counterfeited. And I was so furious that I decided that I needed to fight back. So that's what I think I'm here to talk about today. Lorenzo?
Lorenzo Conti. I founded a business called Crover off the back of my PhD at the University of Edinburgh. There I was working in the field of granular materials, which most people never heard of. But it's actually the most traded family of commodities worldwide. Is anything from sand to chemical powders and grain. And we use the technology from my PhD that makes it possible to move through these type of environments to develop a system that helps maintain the quality of grains in silos and sheds. So when you have large bulks of barley or wheat, our robot swims through these large bulks, monitors the condition, collects samples, and helps keep the grain aerated.
So can we stay with you just for a moment? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that transition from PhD academia into entrepreneurship. Was it easy? Was it mind-blowing? Like how was that transition for you?
It kind of happened. It wasn't something that I was planning for. I go to a lot of these events where most people say, you know, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. That was never really something that crossed my mind until the kind of physical effect that I discovered during the PhD came up. And then, like, even at that point, I wasn't really, you know, immediately thinking about startups, but then I was lucky enough to meet one of the advisors from the university, Ross, which if any of you is working through startups might have met from Edinburgh Innovation students. and he kind of guided me through those first steps. And about 3 months in, I was like, okay, I guess we're building a startup.
And has it been what you expected, or was it, have you spoken to investors? Like, how have you had to step into that journey of, okay, now I'm leading something that is commercialized?
Yeah, I think maybe the part that you're least prepared coming from an academic background is the fundraising side, whether it's grants or investment. It just, especially if you're dealing with hardware and new technologies, it takes a lot of time and money to get to the point where you can have a mature product that can reach mass adoption. And so that was all things that I had to learn along the way. I think I'm still learning because our largest round to date, like single round, has been $500,000. So we really need to get to some higher numbers now. And obviously, some of the accelerators, like the one that the Bay Center here runs, helped in that sense, create connections and so on. But then you really need to get to the point where your whole business is framed in a way that is suitable for VCs and people with larger amounts of money. And there's a lot of sales skills that you have to learn along the way as well, which I'm probably not the best at. So it's been a lot of learning. I think we were talking with James earlier, or someone else in the audience, saying like you've got to be a kind of jack of all trades. And that's true, and then you got to surround yourself also with a lot of people who are like kind of specialists in different areas, and that takes time and resources. So we watch movies, hear the news, like hearing all the success stories and things that those happen overnight. But then if you look in detail through those, it takes years. And if you're starting a business, you got to make sure that it's something you're really committed in for at the very least 5 to 10 years, if not more, and it kind of like takes over your life. Like you gotta change a lot of other plans to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. I think James was talking about that earlier as well. Like the things that you see happen so suddenly and they've exploded are actually just in the background. They've been worked on for years and years and years and years, and we just don't really get to see that bit. Now I know you were desperate to give that mic away, so Rachel, when you started out, did you imagine, okay, I'm going to be a founder, I'm going to be going out there fundraising, that's going to be my role? Like, when did that kind of become apparent that was where you were going with this?
Well, looking at Snapdragon, so I had co-founded the baby product business, and it was turning over a really decent amount of money, and we were exporting it to 50 countries. And I'd never manufactured anything before or distributed it or anything, a massive learning curve. And when it was counterfeited, and I got on a plane and I went to Alibaba with my colleague Jet just to learn how to fight back online, and then came back and decided that I needed to help other people fight back against fakes. And then I decided I needed to pivot. So, I mean, goodness me, as a middle-aged woman from Morningside with a baby product, I am the least likely person to set up a tech company. I'm not in the slightest bit technical. But I was bloody determined that I wasn't going to let other people go through what I had been through, because when you are faked, it is hideous. It's absolutely hideous. So I just kind of went about it because it had to be done. I mean, it wasn't that I didn't sit about going, oh, strategize, will this happen? It was just a case of, right, sort it. And so basically I just thought, right, well, if I can prove an MVP by doing all this manually, which I did, and then everyone was like, oh, right, okay, and we got some clients, all manual, monitoring platforms for fakes and taking them down, taking the fakes offline using intellectual property, all manual, no tech whatsoever. And then I thought, right, well, maybe if I raise some money, I didn't have any money, so if I raised some money, I could bring in the right people and we could build the tech. So that's what I did. So I've raised 4 million and brought in a fabulous team, some of whom are here. One great person here, so please wave. Yeah, huge benefit. So Taeyoon's a significant part of our team. And yeah, built a wonderful team, and here we are. So totally incidentally, if I'd realised how tough it was, I would never have started. Absolutely never have started. And
Is that true?
Yeah, totally.
Really?
Yeah, totally. Not because I don't love the business and the people, but the tech that we have, it's like building tech on moving sands. Because we are scraping marketplaces, the marketplaces change tens of thousands of times a day. And if Amazon changes a pricing pixel, by 1 pixel, we have to change all of our scraping. you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of scrapes to catch up with it. So I still would run a business because I love running businesses and growing businesses, and it's great to have moved from startup to scale up, but I wouldn't have done this.
But the opportunity to make such an impact, though.
Yeah, I love the fact that actually we can, you know, we're doing good in the world. I mean, we really are. And the thing about fakes, which you may or may not know, is that fakes are really shit because people who sell a lot of fakes fund prostitution, they fund drugs rings, they fund people trafficking and terrorism. So you really don't want to be buying a fake. And if you take one thing away from tonight, don't buy fakes. Really, I ask you, please not to do that. Apart from the fact that it's also, you know, taking revenues away from legitimate businesses. But it really is a dangerous, it is not a victimless crime. So.
And you sort of said, so assuming that you went back and you were going to do this, would you have gone back and strategized? Like, do you wish that there had been a strategy, or do you think that this was really born of, I see the problem, I'm going to fix it, and this doesn't need a 12-month runway and X and Y and Z?
Well, I did try to strategize. I mean, I went off to MIT and learned all about entrepreneurship, and that was really fascinating. And I read a great book by Noam Bassam, who's a Harvard professor, which was the Founder's Dilemma. It said, go off and find yourself a co-founder. So I spent 2 years looking for a co-founder, kissed a lot of frogs, and couldn't find one, and then just had to get on with it myself. So, but you know, I've had a fabulous team. I mean, I really have. I mean, the people have been with me since the very beginning, who have just been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And without them, we'd never be where we are. And so it's really hats off to the team, not to me, to be perfectly honest.
Thank you so much. And James, this has been your life, right? Like, you came out of university, you were like, right, this is me, I'm a founder, you just want to kind of go and build things. Do you think that's just inherent to who you are? Do you think that's something that people just have or don't have? Or do you think there's more to it?
I think a big part of it is who you are, and I think that's why I was curious, you know, would you do it again or would you not do it again? Because it's always that double-edged sword, right? You get a chance to solve a big, wicked problem, it's hugely rewarding. You know, it is difficult, right? And I think that's part of the other side that we probably don't talk enough about, is the challenges and what to be prepared for and all the rest of it. Because yeah, there's a lot of times where you kind of go, what the am I doing? This is crazy. And I've always thought about it as a lifestyle choice myself, right? I try to leverage that love I have of solving problems and working in tribes and working with great people and being challenged and challenging the status quo. Can't stand assumptions, right? The idea that we've done something a certain way, so that's how we should do it again, just feels bizarre, right? And I think it's those elements in it that are the innate part in people. It's also why I think it's really difficult to teach entrepreneurship. It's really business 101 and accounting 101 and marketing 101. Being a generalist really helps because you can do a lot of different things, but there's that innate drive, I think, and desire to make an impact or change or whatever it is that gets you out of bed that has to be there, right? That passion, the relentlessness has to be there, because it is 5 years is being graceful. I think it's generally 10 or 15 years through a few near-death experiences, right? As a business, you know, it's easy to be there. It's hard. 9 out of 10 businesses fail, right? It's whether you're a tech business or not, the stats still stay true. So I think you need to understand that in yourself, be self-aware enough, and leverage that to last the distance, you know?
It's amazing. I have interviewed lots and lots of entrepreneurs in my time and talked a lot about entrepreneurship. And already it is just like the most blunt and honest panel, and that's amazing. You know, it really is. I think there's so much to be said for really coming to an event like this and getting the honest answers rather than it just being like, yeah, I just really liked building things and so it's really nice. There is so much more to it, which leads me to a data question, which is, if the data of successful businesses is so bad, why would anyone who is data driven do it, right?
Absolutely. So there was a great research, I think it was a few years ago now, looking at the average founder salary. This is in the US, the average founder salary over the last 20 years or whatever the study was. And it worked out to something like $5 an hour, right? Half the minimum wage. So yeah, it's not about that.
But I mean, as someone that has created something in data, multiple businesses that use so much data, has that ever scared you off, where you're just like, the data doesn't speak to businesses in general being this successful, and that makes me want to back off? Or is that a kind of fighting call for you to say, I'm going to make this one happen?
Well, I'm more than slightly competitive, so for me, it's just a fighting call. But I think it does highlight where data is really, really beneficial, right? Because you can be so impassioned about something, so driven to solve a problem, but if the timing's not there, the market's not there, or you haven't dialed in that proposition, or you don't have the right people, you haven't been able to get the funding, you just haven't found the one customer that's going to make it happen, or, you know, it's data for me has always been the leveler in my perspective, because it doesn't lie. I mean, you can interpret it all sorts of ways, but it gives you a foundation, I think, that's really, really important, and is why, as early as possible, we should be tracking metrics of the business to be able to benchmark what you think versus what's happening.
Thank you very much, and I'd love to hear your perspective on that. You know, you sort of said you wouldn't do it again, but did you want to fight against the kind of idea that, yeah, this could fail, but I'm going to do it, I'm going to make this happen?
I just had to kind of get on and do it, really. I mean, I just thought, right, well, somebody needs to sort this. No, there isn't a solution for an SME to fight fakes that they can afford. There are lots of law firms that were going to charge $100,000 a year. And as an SME with the fakes, with the baby product, I couldn't afford it. So I was like, right, well, there's a problem, so let's sort it. So I think I'm just somebody who likes to solve problems. But I just didn't realize that the tech would be so difficult. But the data, I love the data bit. So, I mean, I'm not in the slightest bit technical, but I love the fact that, and what we love to do with our clients is that if we see that two people in the same industry have got the same person counterfeiting them, it's great to be able to encourage them to share, you know, to share that experience, because fighting back with someone else is infinitely easier than doing it on your own. And particularly if you've got to get the kind of, you know, Chinese authorities involved, you have to prove that $50,000 worth of product has been moved in one go. And it's often really difficult to do that for one brand, but if you're clubbing together with several people in the industry. So I love the data piece. I mean, I'm really not an expert in the data piece, but, you know, that's just a wee piece of it. But yeah, the data's great. It's so insightful, and it just tells you so much, and it just helps us keep these fakes offline to keep people safe.
Thank you. Lorenzo, how's the data looking? Is it all successful over at Crover?
I mean, it's getting better for us. Yeah, definitely. You know, we've gotten through some key milestones, and we've got some more coming up. I think for the mission that we set ourselves, we still have, you know, some way to go. And, you know, really our mission is about enabling humanity to reach below the surface. I guess everyone is driven by different things. In our case was the fact that, you know, we can launch rocket ships in space, but, you know, no one before us had been able to get a device to move even 2 centimeters below the, you know, like the surface of a sand dune, or like, you know, let alone grain and other more, you know, hard type of materials. And so we thought, you know, it goes back to what Rachel was saying, we thought it's something that had to be done. Like, I knew that, you know, with the new effect that I discovered, I was the only person in the world that knew about it, and I could build a team that could tackle this. And so it was, you know, either I do it or no one else is going to. So I'm like, you know, there's some level of selfishness, because you're like, okay, I want to make a lot of money at the same time. But then, you know, you've got to be a bit, you know, you're working towards your customer, and so you want to help people, give them a solution that they couldn't have otherwise. And so you kind of dive head on into it. And I think in terms of data, you know, James was saying like 9 out of 10. My original thesis or hypothesis was that that number would look better if you had a very unique technology and you know, you discovered and everything. And I think the reality is that the data looks even worse because if you're doing something that a lot of other people are doing, sure, you've got more competition, but it means that a lot of the path has already been set for you. You know, like all the technical challenges, or most of them have already been solved. In our case, we had to figure out the entire guidebook of, you know, starting from what does a robo even look like that, you know, moves through these type of environments and uses our effect. And so, you know, we've been fighting against the data and the probabilities, I think those have been somewhat against us from the start. You work through with resilience, and I think a lot of businesses fail because they realize either that the opportunity is not there any longer, that they can't get to their objective, or they just give up because it's so hard. Like we were saying, people can't endure that over a very long period of time. And in our case, it's still there, like the drive, the passion, and the big goal, the big potential is still there. And so we're still going, and we'll I think we will eventually get there. It's just a matter of how big and when.
I think that's such an interesting point of people don't know what they want if it hasn't really existed at all yet. Would you be able to sell a car to people that have just always used horses, right? Like that's the cliche example. So there's something really interesting there of like, is it just creating something totally unique, or actually is it better to be in a market that's already had footprints on it? What do you two think of that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, because I think when I was thinking about setting up Snapdragon, people weren't using intellectual property to take products offline. They were using lawyers. And so the law firms were, we can do this with legal things. And I was like, well, no, we're not. And in fact, somebody said to me at one point, I don't know why you're concentrating on the online world. Nothing's going to happen with the web. And they just kind of clearly just kind of looked at me and thought I was nuts. So now, of course, online brand protection is part of the whole thing, to be looking after any brand. But when I was thinking about it 10 years ago, it really wasn't, and it has taken a wee while to catch up.
James.
That's a TV reference for anyone slightly older. Has everyone heard about open banking? Yeah? So when I was young, when I started off with Direct ID, open banking didn't exist. And I think it's a great example of this, right? Where for about 4 or 5 years, I was laughed out of most boardrooms, people saying it would never happen. I'm like, well, we already share bank statements. Surely we could share bank statements. No, they belong to the bank. It was one problem after another. And unfortunately, the way we tried to help deal with it is we helped build open banking in the UK. And very quickly, it flipped, right? Where you went from being somebody unique in the market, bit of the wild card, trying to, break new ground and all the rest of it, to something that was all of a sudden regulated activity in the UK and in Europe, and it became a big global thing. So yeah, within a couple of years, it changed quite dramatically. And what it used to take me about 45 minutes to describe and defend and pitch was about 6 seconds in the end, right? We use open banking to generate credit scores. Oh yeah, I get that, that makes sense. But it's taken a whole industry and a whole movement behind it to give it that context. And I think you're right, it's sometimes easier to be a lone wolf trying to break new ground, but there's equally an opportunity to leverage a bigger market. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the question was to a VC, I think this is in the US, question was to the VC, how do I build a startup and make a lot of money? That was their goal. And the answer was, don't get involved in tech, buy a bricks and mortar, do something that's consistent. Why don't you do, I think the example was extermination for houses, right? Pest control for houses. Why? Because people need it done every year. They go through the cycle, there's this, there's that, there's other things, there's an established market there that if you can bring efficiency or effectiveness to that business model, it's much easier than coming up with a way of sending robots underneath sand and doing crazy things, And
there was something that we touched on earlier. Lorenzo, you said, you want to make lots of money, right? And I think that is totally valid, and that's why lots of people go into entrepreneurship. And now we have something like ChatGPT, and you could build a business, we were talking about this earlier, you could build a business that might have taken however many weeks or months. You could kind of produce something that could be out there in about 5 hours probably. And does that make you afraid? Tomorrow someone says, we're Grover, and we do this thing, and even if they don't have the product, they can kind of look like they have something. Does that worry that the kind of entrepreneur is almost so level that people that shouldn't go after it are going after it? What do you think?
No, I think if anything is exciting because, a barrier when you're starting off is that you don't have the time and resources to do all the things that you want to do. And, people and time, they cost money. Like if you need 10, 20, 30 or more engineers, that's a lot of money, right? And so if, it's probably not as nice for the engineers whose jobs are getting replaced, but if you've got, a computer that can do the more tedious, especially parts of it, I think everyone is happy in the end. And there's, some skilled element of it and some unique element like that kind of human touch that, I personally still think is still going to be there for at least some time, right? And the AI aspect is enabling a lot of things that even ourselves we couldn't have done at this point. I mean, we started off using AI, for instance, for the sensing element on our system. So our robot goes down and it measures temperature, moisture, now CO2 as well. And because the robot needs to be able to move from one point to the other and collect, data at a lot of points, it needs to be able to take a measurement in every location pretty fast. And like typical grain sensors that are suitable to be used in our kind of environment, not the ones where you take a sample and then analyze it.
I'm like, we know.
Yeah,
we know all about those grains, yeah.
But, the essence is they take a long time. They'll take like an hour or two to like stabilize their reading, and that's too slow for us. And instead, with AI, we managed to like build a model where within 30 or 60 seconds, we can predict what the final value of the reading is going to be. And so that was really key to make kind of our whole system possible. And I mean, there's a lot of other elements in the system. If, we can go on about it for a while, but from automating the way the robot moves through the environment, Richard was talking about moving on kind of flowing sand. That's literally what we're doing, or it's more like we're moving on static sand. But yeah, it's ground that is very unstable. Physical models are limited. They can't really predict well how stuff works in complex scenarios in there. And so having AI better assess and adapt to what is happening to be able to drive the robot through is just key. Like there isn't really any kind of pure mathematical or physical like model that can just do that out of the box. So yeah, it's enabling a lot of things that wouldn't have been possible, and things that us as humans or even computers without AI could have done.
Thank you. Rachel, I'm so interested to know what AI means for fakes. Like, has it ruined your life that people can make a website for a fake? And how do we even find the originals when it's so good? And I mean, tell me, how is it going?
I've got one sheet for pros and one sheet for cons.
Oh, there we go.
So the positive thing about AI is it's been absolutely brilliant for us in terms of removing some of the manual effort required to go through hundreds of thousands of listings and identifying ones which are infringing somebody's intellectual property. About 90%. It's removed about 90% of the manual work. So for the team, it's marvelous because their jobs are better. So that is absolutely key. And because we use things with like text recognition and OCR as well, so object character recognition, and we train the AI, it's got much better. So say we have hundreds of thousands of listings come back looking for a bicycle, and it knows that if it's a green bicycle, if it gets 95% right, then actually there's an infringement on the green bicycle. So actually it has made an enormous difference to us, apart from the fact you have to train every single model separately, of course, but no, that's brilliant. On the con side, absolutely right. So people are now using AI to design around things, to avoid infringing patents, design rights, not trademarks, but all the rest of it. And fraudsters are a wily lot. They were always a wily lot, but they've got much more wily with the use of tech. So that is much more difficult. And I think there's going to be quite an impact, particularly on patents going forward from this kind of thing. And patent trolls are already an issue, particularly in the States, but actually I think this is going to have a big impact.
It's amazing how there's like the kind of general impact of AI and then these really particular kind of effects that we don't even quite understand the fullness of yet, that are on the way / already here. Anything to add to that, James?
As a huge Gen AI fan, I think there's a big opportunity. You know, it's not whether you're using it or not, it's that you are using it, because I think that's the reality is, you know, it's an efficiency engine if we think about large language models. And if we combine that, if I put my startup hat on, it's okay to fail, just fail quickly. The sooner that you get through testing and validating, developing, expanding an idea, the better, right? So using these models to do a lot of day-to-day stuff, repeatable stuff, to use as a research tool, to draft copy, whatever. It's never going to be perfect, but if it gets you 80% of the way there in 2 minutes, I had to write a letter for a grant application for someone the other day. I used Gen AI, sent it through. They came back, they said, that's perfect. I thought, well, there you go. It took me 5 minutes. Fantastic. 5 minutes instead of 2 hours, 3 hours trying to think, how do I write it? What should I start with? All the rest of it. So I think we should all be using it. And it's not whether, I don't think there's I think everyone's going to end up using big chunks of it. You just Copilot. Has anyone played with Copilot recently? Yeah, great examples. You know, if you don't know how to create a presentation, getting 80% of the way there in 5 minutes, then allows you to spend the rest of the time polishing something or developing or testing it or whatever. So hugely empowering.
Do you think there's a sort of philosophical part of this where we might miss out on the like poetic genius of the mind at work, right? Like if we always get given a place to start, then it's always going to be that place. But if we were able to, you know, it might take us 10 hours, right? I'm imagining the advertising executives of the 50s and the 60s throwing, you know, balls in the air and drinking whiskey and, I've got an idea. Like, do you think we lose that? Or do you think that we just get that in other places?
I think we just get that in other places. And it's the acid test, right? If it's effective, does it need to be any better, right? If you had an idea, an advertising campaign, it's 100% effective. Everyone clicks the link. If it was generated by AI, then that takes the box. Do you need to do any more? I guess would be part of the question. But conversely, it doesn't stop you having to think. You still have to think. We're just moving from the creators of content in a pure sort of way to the curators of it. We're becoming directors and producers more than, you know, copywriters all the time.
That was beautifully said.
Thanks.
Anything that you want to add?
And you can do something more interesting with your life.
Yeah.
Oh.
During those spare hours, you know, which is fantastic when you think about the hours that everybody puts in when they're setting up a business. Then marvelous. You actually might get a work-life balance.
Every
think?
startup, the critical asset or resource is time, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
we're all time poor.
Yeah.
If you can add 80% more time back onto your day, why wouldn't you?
That's a fantastic point. So now I get to talk about my favorite thing ever. I was so happy when I saw the theme of this panel discussion. Please tell me you all know about the Wonka experience. Put your hand up if you know about the Wonka experience. Okay, James, you have been living under a rock. James did not know what I was talking about when I was talking about this earlier. Oh my goodness, Rachel, where have you been? Lorenzo, have you heard of the Wonka experience?
I'll give a hug to anyone who's never heard of it.
Oh my goodness. Okay, right, so for those of you who do not know, the Wonka experience is the best thing that ever happened ever. This is in Glasgow. This is a man who put together a kind of Wonka-themed event for children, £35 to get in, but the whole thing was shambolic when you got there. So just, I mean, that's a physical thing. That's nothing to do with data. It was just dreadful. I can't believe there's Oompa Loompa pictures, it's so big. But the big thing was that the whole website, all of the advertising was generated with AI, right? So you've got these stunning images, some words that aren't even words because AI has produced it. So all of the advertising was really clean and slick. It was AI produced. which meant that it kind of existed at a level that people thought they were then going to get a great product. And I think that's maybe the concern, is AI is almost so shiny that it maybe doesn't reflect what's behind it, right? Like, is that business credible? And anyone can kind of look credible now. That's my interpretation of it. We've all got AI, we've all got Canva, you can make a really beautiful website in 2 minutes. So how do we, as consumers, but also as entrepreneurs, differentiate between who's actually kind of got this, who's experienced, who's got the knowledge, who's got the integrity behind the business that they've created, versus you have to look at this, the unknown.
Before, though.
How?
Well, you could have just created a website.
But would it have existed? I have tried to make a WordPress many years ago, and I'm telling you, it did not look good. So it's so much easier now to say, look, like I've spat out something and it's beautiful, and this looks like it could be a Disneyland attraction, right? But it's actually a warehouse of like horror, you know? So how do we avoid that in this future of AI makes anything look good? What do you think?
I think that's been happening for years. I think it's just possibly shinier. But I mean, that's just fraud, you know, and that's been happening forevermore. People, if you've watched The Apprentice recently, my God, I mean, they're selling, you know, astonishing events all the time, and they're all rubbish. So, I mean, yeah, it looks, I mean, I don't, as it happens, imagine it was a complete disaster, was it? Yeah, of course. Well, you know, I think that, you know, there's just going to, perhaps there'll be more of it, but, you know, we see fake websites all the time. And the problem with fake websites, which we then try to take down, is that it's what goes beyond the fake website. So it's the fact that somebody goes onto the fake website and either puts in their credit card details and doesn't get a product, or they click on a link, which, you know, and they're at work, and then there's some kind of Trojan horse that jumps into the work computer from the crap website, or they send out invoices which people pay. So all of these things are happening, but they've been happening for a while, just in a different way. So I think it's just a new form of fraud. That's what I think.
Or a new form of perspective in some ways. I mean, you could look at news. A lot of fake news is generated by AI. I don't know if anyone's seen videos these days are becoming more and more prevalent in your feeds and your social. It's becoming, you know, you're starting to see it and see the patterns and recognize it more. But who's to say the journalist had the same view or was right 20 years ago or 100 years ago, right? I think these things are bringing it to the forefront more, which is good, because we need to be more self-aware. We need to be more thinking about what is the message, what are they trying to tell me, why are they telling me, and so forth, and not just be blind to it looks good, so I will trust it, you know?
And is there a way that we can do that? Like, what are the questions that we should be asking ourselves when we're seeing things?
They're
like
asking you for your bank account details. No, just kidding.
But yeah, I mean, it's still, right? Like, how do I, as a layperson, look at everything, the entrepreneurship, all these new businesses that are popping up every single day, and know where I can put my trust? Like, what do you think? As people, you know, you're kind of seasoned entrepreneurs in a way, and I'm not saying that there's a threat to your kind of vocation, but it does feel like, okay, well, anyone could say, I am what you are, right? How do I know that you are James Varga, who has all of this experience, Rachel Jones, who's been doing this for so long, right? Like, how do we know? How do we find out who is the right people to engage with or to learn from?
In the world of identity and fraud, there's a great saying on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, right? You know, I mean, that's a long time ago. I think we have to look for more trusted groups, more social peers, more networks. I think just relying on everything that you see coming through your feed isn't validated anymore, right? You know, and it goes from, you know, so you're looking for an accountant. How do you know your accountant's not going to steal your money? Because that happens, right? I know people that have had accountants and CFOs with businesses who have run away with money, and, you know, you never know. So I think the only thing we can do is think about it and look for that sort of referenceability, I guess, that sort of trust that you get through having worked with other people. And that's why we should have conversations and be open and share ideas and stuff like that, you know?
I'm glad you're here, sharing your ideas. Rachel, Lorenzo, anything to add to that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think throw in a healthy dose of cynicism would be the other thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite interesting the point that you were making about the Wonka experience. And, you know, I agree with what James and Rachel were saying, but there's definitely an element where, as humans, we still have the upper end, and it's the fact that we have a physical body, and they don't.
But now.
for now, which I guess is where, you know, robotics is coming in. We're sitting next to some robots there in the lab, which are not quite at that point where, you know, like people can do the same things that we do. And I think it's a bit like kind of when you're dreaming or imagining something and you try to come up a solution in your head, but then it's not the same as like kind of running experiments and getting like kind of tangible results. I think that that's really where, you know, like we are still essential as people, or will still be essential no matter how good these models get, unless we can make the robots good enough.
And just to go back to data for a minute, we talked a lot about kind of AI entrepreneurship, how that fits together. But you know, for you, have you ever come to a place where you're like, right, the data is saying we're going to completely reposition ourselves or redirect this business? Like, has this boom of data changed your business, or do you think it's just kind of fed the way that you were already doing things?
I mean, because we were sort of still in the initial stages as it came along, it just kind of improved our plans and it merged with our plans. So I guess we are lucky to be, you know, doing it at this point. If we were a 20 or 30-year-old business, I guess it would have been different, but we didn't have that experience.
You said that as if it was shameful.
Yeah.
If we were 20 years old.
It would be nice, but you know, to have an established business and, you know, less things to worry about. Because at this point, you know, we were talking about the challenges, and you got to keep growing all the time, right? You don't have that kind of stability quite yet. But I don't know if you have thoughts, Rachel.
Well, I'm not sure I have stability. No, I do have stability. I mean, I just think you worry about it all the time. I think that more data is super helpful. And I think quite often when you're running a business, you're doing quite a lot of pivoting anyway. So, yeah, it definitely has, more data has definitely driven the sprint planning, which isn't always straightforward. But yeah, I mean, the more information you have, the better decisions you can make. So, yeah, I like that.
Thank you.
It really depends on context, doesn't it? And what you're trying to solve for, I think, is the biggest one. It doesn't lie if you read it correct, I think, is the value in it. We talk about A/B testing every day. If we're not using data every day as part of a startup or business or whatever, we're missing a trick, right? So I think it's there's an innate sort of connection with building a business and being successful and all the rest of it. You have to look for these sources to tell you that you're on the right track. And sometimes, as one example, years ago, we wanted to build this virtual card thing. Anyways, context is important. I loved the idea of building it orange because I thought, actually, German engineering, Audi, silver, orange, that would be amazing. So we put it out there because there was one person in the team that didn't like orange. We put it out there and it turned out about 60% of people preferred blue. So we went with blue because that's, in a situation like that, is the majority wins, right? Regardless of what you think or how you feel, in some cases, the majority wins. In other cases, you got to be confident enough to like buck the trend and just do what you want to do. So I know I'm not really answering your question, but I think it's...
Did Monzo come along and you were like, what? Monzo on your coral card?
Starling is a great example. Starling was pink, I think, wasn't it, at the beginning? What was Starling? Does anyone remember? Monzo? What was Monzo at the beginning?
Monzo has always been orange, right?
Orange.
Orangey pearly.
Well, Tom fell out with Anne, so he wanted to do something different, but still brightly colored, I think is the story there. But yeah, no, it was pink. And you know, in a traditional financial services, great example, you would never go down that road, right? RBS, NatWest, you maybe had a little red in Santander, but financial services was blue, red, that was it, right? So bucking the trend worked out well, but it's a gamble, so you have to test it.
Thank you so much for answering all of my questions. Thank you for humoring my chat about the Wonka experience. I still need to show you this. It's just so good.
I'll be searching for it.
It's gonna blow your mind. There is now time for questions from you. So you've had loads of time to think of things that you might want to ask. We do have the roving microphone. So hands for any questions? Yeah?
Hi, I'm interested in the natural size of your startups at different levels of maturity, and whether this AI and data tools are reducing the number of heads that you need to run your businesses at different levels?
It's a great question.
Well, I could answer that. So, no, it hasn't. We've been able to use the AI to do the duller stuff and give the team more interesting things to do. So it definitely hasn't reduced the team size. I suspect that the recruitment to grow the team is a wee bit slower. But the most important thing from my team's point of view is removing the boredom.
In our case, he hasn't removed any roles, so we are creating a new role for a data scientist. There's a bit of a process because we're trying to do it through what is called like ADP, so it'll probably be early next year. But yeah, we saw the need to have someone dedicated on like kind of training these models, improving them. So it probably still ties with the fact that we are an early stage business. We didn't have people doing kind of so much like manual data entry or like kind of, tedious, job roles dedicated on like tedious tasks. We have like, all highly skilled people in the team. And so, yeah, it worked well for us.
I'd agree with Rachel. It's not about making people redundant. I think it's about making people more effective, right? Early stage in a business, if you're 2 or 3 people, you can probably now do a lot more without going out and asking people for help and borrowing resource and having people on Upwork quickly mock up things or whatever. You can do a lot of that yourself, right? If you want to design a new company logo, you don't need a graphic designer beside you. You can play around with some ideas, at least to get to the conceptual stage, but you probably still need to put it out to a designer for that last 20%, right? Later stage, I think it's just about making things more effective, right? Having people focus on the higher value part of their role, the job, the problem that you're trying to solve, instead of getting caught up in doing the easy stuff. I'm a huge Gen AI fan. I've trained models for a bunch of things. It allows me, as someone who's dyslexic and slightly on the spectrum, I'm not the best at writing, and grammar's, I don't use the Queen's English and I get teased for it all the time, and spelling and all the rest of it. I can now do a lot of that stuff myself. Would I still get someone to proofread it? Absolutely, because that's the 20%, not the 80% of coming up with that. So yeah.
Thank you. That was a great question. Thank you. Any other questions in the room? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Maybe a question to Rachel. You said if you knew all of the data from the beginning, you maybe wouldn't have started the business, and I appreciate the honesty. But also later on, you mentioned that sometimes when you have all of the data, it helps you make better decisions. So for someone starting early, at one point do you think gathering data would help them, or at one point it is like ignorance is a bliss? Would there be like a rule of thumb of, okay, that information is maybe not that important at this stage, or I shouldn't decide with it if I should go forward with this? Maybe this is a killer information, I should just stop. I don't know. I know this is a bit vague, but yeah.
I think it's the thing I didn't realise was going to be so difficult was building tech that would monitor moving sands. So that's the bit that has been so incredibly difficult, and I'm not technical. So that's the thing which, if I'd realised, I wouldn't have started it. But the fact that it gives us all this data now is brilliant. I mean, I love that. I absolutely love that. I love being able to say to people, we have removed £5 million worth of fake goods for you this week. So that, that data piece is really important, and we're incredibly passionate about delivering it. And I think when it comes to whether you're busy, whether you want to run your business, set up your business and run it or not, it just boils down to, is there a market? Will people pay for it? Has it got your heart and soul in it, or have you got your heart and soul in it? Because actually, it is really tough to run a business, and you will give up a lot to do it. But it can be incredibly rewarding, and you might change the world.
Thank you. So there's mainly a question about generative AI, but I guess you've mentioned that this is something that you've used in your businesses to sort of success. Do you have any like security concerns about using this, about where your data is really, what's happening to your data when you enter it into a generative AI model, or are you trying to develop your own like LLMs and generative AI solutions to use in a secure environment?
Another great question. Anyone want to jump in?
I use both. And I think just as eyes wide open, be aware of what you're using what for. What's wrong with using GPT if you're doing research? Already, I mean, the fact that it knows you're asking a question has no value to anybody anyways, right? So, or pretty much anyways. So yeah, no, I think just be eyes wide open with it. And there's so much happening in this space. There's a platform for everything. If you're that worried about it, you can even run Llama 2 in a browser locally if you wanted to go to that extent, right? Like there's a huge amount of optionality out there for it.
James is on commission from generative AI. Is that right?
I'm not a technical person. I mean, I use ChatGPT to help with things, and I never put anything terribly sensitive into it. But our own data models are all in-house, so we definitely wouldn't put anything that would go anywhere with it. But I'm super careful about what I use it for. And I just use it to help me with texts that I'm putting myself to sleep with that I could improve. I literally just say to it, please improve the grammar and make it more exciting within 500 words, plonk. And then it comes back. And sometimes it's better and sometimes it isn't, but at least it gives me something else to read.
A really good, simple experiment actually for anyone who wants to do it is if you have a website or something like that, PDF your website, put it into, GPT does this, you can set up an assistant, you can use the PDF to train a assistant, which isn't a whole model, but it's enough to give it context, and the answers you get back will all of a sudden be in your voice and that much better and stuff. So I think there's little things that you can do, not necessarily using any sensitive, proprietary, risky data, but you can use public data for these things as well, right? Yeah.
Another question?
Hi, like you, Rachel, I am not a tech genius in any way, but hopefully think to be successful at some point. But the platform I'm working with just now, for the last couple of months, we've got an AI component, and we need to train it, and we'd like to get that information from our community and early adopters. Have you got any tips or insight as to a strategy to go around doing that very well?
Well, I think the community is key, isn't it? I mean, what about this community? Do you want to start with them? And actually, people are really helpful, and we all want to help. So, yeah, put out a call for assistance and help and feedback, and I'm sure you'll get folks. We've been doing all that kind of thing for years. I mean, my father, who's now nearly 90, was a really early user of, kind of spotting fakes. Can you understand how it works? If you can do it, then somebody in a law firm will be able to do it. So, yeah, ask for help. If you don't ask, you'll never know.
Got time for one, possibly two more? Go ahead.
I guess this is a question for Lorenzo. As you're translating your academic research into the marketplace, can you say more about how you identified potential customers and translated this idea? Because as you pointed to, taking something that maybe is a prototype in the lab, but actually putting that into a commercial product, a robot that actually functions, there's this very high barrier of development and specialization. And how did you find customers that are willing to kind of take that leap, and how did your funding stretch that development? Can you say more about managing that?
Yeah, so the approach that we took was starting with secondary research. So, like kind of studying market data and so on. We also got a bit of support from the university. We paid a professional company that does market studies to kind of come up with some numbers. And initially we were considering different market opportunities. So we wanted to assess, which one to focus on first. And the grain storage one kind of was already the one that we were more kind of thinking of, and it ended up being the ones with the numbers that looked more promising in the kind of short to medium term. And then kind of almost in parallel a bit after that, you know, like Rachel was saying, like if you talk to people and you tell them about what you're doing, like usually people are happy to help. I mean, you might also get the odd disgruntled person that if you give them a call, they'll be like, oh no, I don't want to talk to you. But you know, we were lucky, I think, that we didn't get many of those. Like it was probably the 0.1% conversations that we had. And yeah, just through word of mouth, you know, like, do you know a farmer that has grain storage or like a grain trader or a cooperative? And I think it's one of those things that like you often have some degree of connection to the person that you're looking for. Sometimes it might be, you know, 1 or 2 degrees. Other times it might be 15. But you know, the more you walk your way through that path, the more people, you know, the more potential customers you're able to talk with. And so we ended up like doing a lot of that quite early on, because also it was coming from academia, it was new to us. You know, we wanted to make sure that we develop a product that met their needs. And like, for instance, some of the features that we've got now, especially the sampling one, so the ability to collect samples at depth, that was something that like we hadn't even thought of initially. And then we just started getting people out of the blue that had heard about what we were working on, asking, you know, can you collect samples? And it was like more and more people. And then you see this like kind of big pool from the market where a lot of people are asking something that you didn't even put anywhere on your website or marketing material. And you're like, okay, maybe we should do that. So yeah, it takes time, I guess. That's part of the challenge, right? And it's different from what you're used to doing at an academic level, but it's part of the product development journey. So I would suggest to do as much of that as you can. I think the ideal scenario is one where you start off with the customers. That's even better, right? You know, you've got someone who's already like committed to paying X and will pay for your development. But I think that's true in some industries who are used to innovation and doing that. And by a lot of other industries, you know, that's really hard to do. And so you, depending on, if you want, we can have a chat later, depending on like what market you're targeting, I think you also have to adapt a bit your strategy.
And does anyone in here know a farmer with grain storage? Do you actually? That was a joke. You killed my joke, Rachel.
I was desperate to help.
No, we don't.
I'm desperate to help. Go on then, sorry.
No, the joke was that who knows a farmer with grain storage, but Rachel does. So I'm the loser in this.
I'm desperate to help.
That is everything that we have time for, and you have talked about that you have to give things up to be a founder, and you gave up your Tuesday evening. It is Tuesday, right? Is it Thursday? Is it Tuesday? It's Tuesday. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Can you please give such a big thank you to our 3 panelists? Appreciate you. So, oh my goodness, I'm attached, no, we're fine. So we just have about 15 minutes more of some networking time. There might be a sort of bucket with like 1 drink left in it if you want to fight over that. But before you leave, I just want to say one more lovely thing about the community. If you missed the singing QR code that doesn't sing, that is there. So I'll give you another 10 seconds. If you'd like to take a photo of that, please do join the community. It's an incredible space and just so many things going on. It's really amazing. And there's also some really exciting things coming up. So the Data for Entrepreneurs online course, we've had the first cohort of that, which is really exciting. There is 20% off if you are a community member. Being a community member is free, as far as I'm aware. So again, QR codes. We love QR codes over here. If you want to take a look at that, that is there. And there is also the AI Accelerator, so Scale Up Business Development Program for high growth potential companies. So that's really exciting. That is applications opening in April, and that is starting in September. So if that is of interest to you, there is a QR code, fantastic. So there's another QR code there, and you can speak to any Data Lab people and obviously go onto the community and learn more about that. That is enough from me. Please do enjoy the rest of your evening. Please give one more huge thank you to our guests. Fantastic.
And to the host.
To the crazy host. Thank you so much. Enjoy.